We are live on Martinis with Scott. We'll wait for some people to join if they want. Welcome, everybody. Episode 14. Coming to you at an odd time because I'm on Mountain Time today, and we're live on episode 14 from the Fernie Distillers. You can see the distillery set up behind me here in Fernie, British Columbia, in the mountains. My second, or maybe my first now, my adopted home. All right, let's get at this thing. Hey, if you're a business owner, entrepreneur, and you like to constantly learn and win at business, Martinis with Scott is for you. Join us. We're usually once a week. Sometimes we have more content than that. An in-depth conversation about winning at business. Martinis with Scott. You can subscribe to us on YouTube at the Martinis with Scott channel, and we also have a podcast version on Apple Podcasts, on iTunes, and also on Spotify. Enough of the theme song. Thank you, Waylon. Olga, thank you for joining us. Glad you're here. Cheers, everyone. I hope you have a beverage and you're enjoying your beautiful Thursday afternoon, although I hear it's bad weather in the east. It's beautiful here. As I said, live to you from Fernie, BC, and my favorite vodka, maybe in the world, is right here from Fernie Distillers, and they make it literally right here. So what's going to happen in a minute is that I think Jordan, the awesome bartender, is going to come in with some sort of drink that I don't know what it is, and he's going to explain it to us and maybe talk about some of the products from the Fernie Distillers. And so I'll just wait for him before I start talking about the distillers here. I hear it's beautiful in the east, and not to listen to Kate. She's a downer, and Nostrovia as well. Thank you for that. I couldn't have spelled Nostrovia that, but I could say it, or at least I could the first time. Nostrovia. All right. So today I'm by myself, and because I'm traveling, and we're going to talk about licensing intellectual property, either as a licensee or a licensor in the cannabis sector. Everybody's looking to license in the cannabis sector, and that could be brands, formulas, concepts, genetics, know-how, whatever. But it's a big gold rush, and a shortcut to getting there is through license deals. So that you're not making the investment. And we're just seeing this over and over. You see it in the press over and over. So it's a good topic. License deals are driven, I think, by the mad scramble to take advantage of this sector. You could be a new entrant or a failed entrant in the sense that you had a plan, it didn't work out, and you're looking to secure your spot before the boom is over and take advantage of these massive valuations. And one way to do that is through a licensing deal. You may be an established and very successful participant in the cannabis sector, say a grower, but you're looking to move to another segment of the market. And that could be, so for example, a grower moving to a processor, or a processor moving to a brander, or a grower moving to a brander, right? If you're, in effect, a farmer in Canada or in Colorado, and you're growing cannabis, what do you know about creating a lifestyle brand, or a sing brand, or whatever it is, or a medical brand on the CBD side? So licensing is a way maybe to move you from one segment of the market to another, because you see that that's where the valuations are going, and you're chasing those valuations. So I personally, and Sinclair Range, sinclairrange.com, as you know, you can always look that up and check out the Martinis with Scott are listed on there, and Sinclair Range hosts a lot of our content. I'm asked to advise, give insight, give ideas for structuring IP agreements, and probably once a week, like a lot. This is coming through now. And the question that is posed to me is always the same. The question is, if it's the licensee, is what royalty should we pay? What's a fair royalty? And if it's the licensor, it's like, I don't know, what should I charge these guys? What's the royalty that I should collect from giving them access to, my know-how or my genetics or my brand or whatever? And it's it's an impossible question to answer for a couple of reasons. But one reason is they've skipped through, in the premise of the question, they've skipped through all of the other business issues that need to be considered before you arrive at price. And so I thought today what we'll do is talk about the issues that you need to consider and agree upon, not only so that you have the checklist of the sorts for the negotiation, but also to talk to your lawyer. You'll have a checklist of these are the things that we want to talk to, and you'll save yourself a bunch of legal fees if you're organized. And lastly, it will help you, knowing all the issues that you need to discuss will help you very much in arriving at the price, the royalty that you think is fair. Okay, a little disclaimer. I'm not a lawyer. Sinclair Range are not lawyers. We don't even employ lawyers anymore. We used to, but we don't at the moment. One of our managing directors moved on to an OSC board position, a commissioner position at the Ontario Securities Commission. So he was our last remaining in-house counsel. And so, Ray, we still miss you. But here's the point. We're not lawyers. Don't take legal advice from us. What I'm intending to do is talk about the business points that you should consider, and then you need to go get legal counsel. And do you need to get legal counsel? Absolutely. Particularly in this sector. I'm not so worried about it if you know what you're doing in other sectors and you're trying to license or, buy or sell or license IP. It's not that as difficult, but the cannabis sector has many little nuances that make this greatly difficult. And one of the nuances is that in the U.S., because cannabis is not federally legal, it's legal in some states. The federal regime for registering and granting IP protections, I'll talk about that a bit more, it isn't doing it. So, if someone's in Colorado and they have a brand or they have a genetic, odds are that's not protected in other states, right? So this is a big deal when you're trying to license this and you're building your model based on other jurisdictions, based on a national market. You need to think about that. You need legal due diligence. You need legal advice. You could lose your license. You could lose your IP. You could not get paid. You could end up in court. So go talk to a good lawyer. And I have two good lawyers. I have one in Canada and one in the U.S. who would be perfect for this. If you want a reference, just let me know. You know how to reach me, or you will know how to reach me at the end of this show. So what we're going to do is walk through the typical sections of an IP license agreement, because that's a good way to create a checklist for business points to talk about. And as I said, if you can get these points hammered down in your mind in advance, it will help you establish valuation and pricing. It will help you in your negotiation, because the other party to this may not be thinking of all these points. And it will certainly help in your conversation with your legal counsel when you go to see them. I always talk about with clients and people I'm advising, and they're starting a business and there's 4 partners and they need a shareholders agreement. And you go into your lawyer and you say, well, we're 4 partners, we need a shareholders agreement. And the lawyer takes you through a checklist of all of the business points that you haven't thought about. Like, should there be drag-alongs and tag-alongs? Should there be first rights of refusal, a shotgun? How does it work? All that sort of stuff. What happens when, party A dies? Does the shares go to the estate? Is there some sort of buy-sell mechanism coming out of that? You have 4 people in a room who haven't thought of these things. That's a really expensive shareholders agreement. Whereas if you can come in and say, we've thought about these things and here's the answers, and this is largely a drafting exercise, and tell us where we're wrong, it's a moderately priced shareholders agreement. It saves you a lot of money. And in this case, you're negotiating with a license agreement, you're negotiating with a third party. And so you want to know these things up front. You want to have a position on them, and you want to make sure it makes sense. So point number one, after I drink some more martini, is to properly define what is the IP and what is not the IP. And that's the same with any licensing deal. What is your intellectual property, and who owns it, right? And we talked about in the cannabis sector in particular before, that you need to do a deep dive into whether this thing is properly protected in any jurisdiction, and if so, in what jurisdictions. And remember, in the US, it's not federally legal, and therefore you're relying probably on state protections, which is a different animal. So don't assume because you're good in Colorado that you're good somewhere else. You may not be. And you need to be smarter than me for this in terms of legal experience. So you need lawyers on board, but remember that it's an issue. And what happens if the person licensing this IP to you, if you're the licensee, if they don't actually own it, but they think they own it, right? So you need due diligence from lawyers. I remember an example. I'm going to try and tell you this story without giving any names, but of a U.S. Grower, let's put it that way, who holds a genetic that is well known to have success in with seizures and epilepsy. And the brand existed long before it was legalized. Cannabis was legalized, even in Canada, never mind where they are in the US. And they license these genetics, or this genetic and the brand, to a Canadian LP, to a Canadian producer, or someone who intended to be a Canadian LP. And the Canadian LP didn't pay for it. They screwed it up. They didn't do the things that they were supposed to do. And it wasn't that simple, because I think that there was a disconnect on what the expectations were, which we'll talk about shortly. But as it turns out, someone in the same town, another LP in the same town as this LP that licensed this genetic, this brand, had the exact same genetics of their own, but they had it separately because there was a whole black market in this industry long before things became legal. And literally, their next door neighbor had the exact same chemistry, the exact same plant, without the brand, so to speak. So what does that mean? What does that mean for your license deal? You need to do due diligence, and you think about who owns what and where they own it. To help your thinking, it's useful to understand what intellectual property is and what we mean by that. And I'm, again, as a non-counsel, non-lawyer, I'm not going to walk you through this in detail, but IP encompasses, the way we use the term, a lot of different things. It could be trademarks, right, which is a combination of letters and words and sounds and designs that distinguish one company's product or goods from another company's goods. Could be a patent. We all know what that is, or maybe none of us know what that is, but we all have a vague idea of what it is. Copyrights, which is an original piece of art or writing or something like that, that one is protected on for a limited period of time. Could be an industrial design, something that makes the visual design of an object. It could be a trade secret, a formula is relevant to cannabis. Practices and processes that would be relevant to the processing side of the biomass. Design, instrument, pattern, compilation of information. It's almost the same in some instances as the last category here that I would talk to you about, which is know-how, which is, just a catch-all for everything that's IP and that you know how to do, which is supposed to be a secret, right? All that stuff that's in your NDA that you didn't want to specifically spell out, it's that stuff. Product branding, trademarks, distribution networks, licenses, recipes, formulations, product techniques. What else is on here? Infused marijuana products, oils, waxes, shatter, and other cannabis extractions and concentrates, right? All sorts of things can fall into this know-how category. Understand what it is that you're licensing, so you can communicate it to other stakeholders, so you can communicate it to your legal counsel, and just to help your own understanding of what you're getting yourself into and what protections apply and what protections don't apply. As I said, I think earlier, the most complicated thing in the cannabis industry is to have the licensor prove exactly what they own. The cannabis is federally illegal. U.S. Patent and Trademarks Office won't issue trademarks for cannabis and many marijuana-related products. And too often, lawyers will tell you that cannabis companies just jump to the chase and they start talking about commercial terms of the deal without even establishing whether this exists. There's a decent chance if you're trying to license a product that the person licensing to you doesn't have protection on that, particularly in the U.S. So take that seriously. You need to consider in the granting of the IP from the licensor to the licensee, are you doing this exclusively? Are you doing it on a non-exclusive basis, right? Obviously, and that's both from the licensor and the licensee perspective, right? So as a licensee, am I the only person getting this brand under license, or is the person who owns the brand going to license it out to a bunch of different people? Are they going to create the product on their own under that brand name, or do I have sole use of that brand? If you're the licensor, you want to know if you can sell this to other people as well, but you also want to know what the licensee's up to. What are they doing with that brand? Are they creating just the product that you intended for them to create on that brand, or are they going to try to extend the brand into other products that you hadn't considered that might be a failure and that may in fact drive down the value of your brand? There's obvious impacts on valuation, and valuation drives price. And we started this show talking about how do we try to price these license deals. So you need to be able to answer exclusive versus non-exclusive, and specifically what's your IP and on what products or genetics or brands or whatever. Okay. The third point I want to raise here is the duty of the licensee and to use the license and the duties of the licensor. In other words, who's doing what? And this is often not well thought out. So if you think about, say, delivering a CBD-based medical product in whatever, let's say Canada, right? So you've got a grower, you've got genetics that they're growing, you've got the processor in various stages to the distillate or the oil or whatever it is that you're trying to do. You've got the formula that uses that oil in the distribution channel. You've got the sales reps, and you've got all that sort of stuff, and the marketing and advertising that goes along with that, right? That's how you create and sell a product in any industry, not just in cannabis. Well, who's doing that stuff, right? Specifically, who's going to do that stuff? And in general, a licensor is going to want to exercise as much control as possible in this discussion because they want to protect their brand. And in general, a licensee is going to want, Olga's telling me that the connection is bad. It is really choppy. I don't know what to do about that. Hopefully it's working well enough. But now I'm distracted from the show. So I'll have a drink while Olga responds to me on that. Which she hasn't done, so I'm just going to carry on. Where was I? And this who's responsible for what can be a significant issue in the in a regulated industry. Sorry, Olga keeps talking to me by chat. She says, now it's better, but you're in and out. I don't know what that means. I'm just going to ignore these chats from now on and try to focus. This can be particularly difficult. Olga, let me know if it cuts off, okay, entirely. Apart from that, I'm just going to try and focus on this and speak a little bit more clearly. Who's responsible for what is not as easy as it sounds in a regulated industry, because you have to be regulated. You have to have a license to do a lot of these different things. And in fact, even having a profit participation in one of the roles the other person is doing may put you offside with the regulator. So things to think about, who's growing, who's manufacturing and processing, what are the standards and the standards and procedures for the level of manufacturing, who's in charge of quality control, inspections, and all that sort of stuff, who's selling and distributing. Who's advertising and promoting, and are there minimum spends associated with that? Are there minimum volumes associated with that? And this is sort of the heart of the deal. How could you establish a price if you don't know what you're supposed to spend on advertising, or what your minimum expectation is for sales, right? So sort out the entire business case before you get too far into establishing price. This is the heart of the negotiation. 2018, Canopy ended a license agreement with Bedrocan. You can go look that up. It was a dispute between partners related to support of the intellectual property. And I'm going to interrupt this right now because I have a new drink coming.
Yes.
Yeah.
How's it going, Scott?
Going well. Say hello, Jordan.
Hello, Jordan. That's a bad joke.
That was a good joke. I like it. What are we drinking?
We have a Martinez variation. So a Martinez actually predates the Martini, and some people speculate that it might be the precursor to the Martini, to the modern day Martini.
What do I have in it?
Gin-based.
Gin.
You got Lillet, so a fortified oaky citrus wine. And then you have our slow gin as well, or the Fifth and Park, we like to call it here at Fernie Distillers. A couple dashes of Campari, and a teaspoon of Curacao and a teaspoon of Maraschino.
All right.
Yeah, so pretty intense. Going to be totally different than your neat vodka martini.
Outstanding.
Yeah, it's
That's
a pretty
good.
cool drink.
So, Jordan, here's what I know about the Fernie Distillers.
Yeah.
Which is not much, but established in 2016.
Correct.
Right? And Jillian and Andrew,
Yep. Also
husband
correct.
and wife,
Yeah.
started this off. And I know it's my favorite vodka
Yeah.
anywhere. It really is. I like it a lot. I know that most people can't buy it.
Yeah.
Unless you're from there.
Yeah, we are the only retailers. We don't ship. But we do have a local private liquor store that also retails our spirit, but mainly it is us, so it's hard to get.
Are you going to expand?
As far as I know, there's no plans to get into any BCL or any sort of liquor store other than what we're already in, mainly because it becomes a conveyor belt almost.
Yeah.
Other bartenders at the bar now. But yeah, so it becomes a little bit mechanical, I'd say, because the BCL requires you to produce so much every month and deliver and make promises, and it just becomes like a machine instead of a loving craft distillery. So I feel like we will not be expanding too much. Yeah,
I will get you a bottle.
Yeah.
Reach out to me or Ashley.
Yeah.
And I'll stick one in my suitcase.
Absolutely.
I have a bunch of people I have to get this product to.
Yeah.
So you've got vodkas. And you got gins, and here's the other point that I learned.
Yeah.
I learned it from you guys, is that gin is vodka with juniper berries in it.
Pretty much. So
I never knew that.
Yeah, the way we make it, and most people, in fact, make it, is technically not vodka just yet, because vodka has to be filtered at least once through charcoal to be called vodka.
Okay.
But we use a neutral spirit, so it is our vodka unfiltered, redistilled with botanicals, and we use 13 different botanicals, including the juniper berry, and 25 pounds of it per batch. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so I bought a bottle of something from you yesterday.
Yeah.
Remember?
Yeah.
The one that's limited.
Yeah, the seasonal, the Fifth and Park.
And I took it home and drank half of it.
So that's what's in your cocktail right now, right? Yeah.
Damn, that's good.
Yeah.
So what was in that? Did you say plum?
Yeah, so locally picked plums from here in Fernie, just down the street actually from us. The name Fifth and Park is where the intersection where they were picked. And then, yeah, the fifth batch of our gin infused with the plums. We use also, to make it a liqueur, you got to add some sort of sweetener. We use Demerara sugar, a molasses-rich, unrefined sugar. And it adds character, like texture, as well as flavor, some caramel and molasses notes. And, of course, it is unrefined and delicious.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
So we're a town of, what, 5,000 people?
Yeah, give or take in the season.
4 to 5, depending where we're at.
I mean, I've heard speculations, but yeah.
I travel, I don't want to say all over the world, but all over North America and Europe. And I drink a lot of cocktails. You can get the best cocktails in Fernie of anywhere I've ever been.
We love making cocktails here, and we love doing the R&D, we call it. So research and development, and that just means making drinks.
I cannot find a better old fashioned in New York that I can get in Fernie.
Yeah.
Right? The boys up at my lodge.
It's very unique because we use the Fernie fog, which you can't
Yeah.
really get anywhere
Right.
else. There isn't many Earl Grey spirits out there, especially liqueurs. I know of one vodka, but other than that, yeah, it's very unique. So,
And these guys at this Distillers have, you can't see it on camera, but there's a cool bar out there, and they've stolen all the best bartenders.
yep.
Right? I don't know, where'd you come from?
Ontario originally.
Where?
Yeah, Mississauga, Ontario.
Mississauga.
Yeah.
All right.
Right on the border, technically, actually, right on Winston Churchill is where my parents live. So,
You're a
Mississauga,
Etobicoke guy.
Oakville. No, actually.
Oh,
but
the
I
other
do-
way.
Yeah, other way. Yeah, you got it. East.
All right. And one of your other bartenders is from the UK.
Absolutely.
He's a good
Yeah.
bartender.
He's a Scotsman.
He's a Scotchman.
Yeah.
There you go. So if you're in Fernie, I know some of our listeners are from Fernie. Come here and have some drinks and
Yeah.
support it. If you want a bottle, I'll stick it in my bag. Serious, let me know.
Yeah, absolutely. The glass that we use in comparison to other bottles that I've seen is actually very robust. So we've had no feedback on breakage.
Oh, really?
Through customs or anything like that.
I wanted to ask you it's a wheat-based
It is.
vodka.
So we use a soft white
From
wheat
Nelson.
from Creston.
from Creston.
Creston, BC. Yeah, soft
Yes.
white wheat from Creston.
I think we all know what grows out there, so maybe that's why this stuff's so good.
Maybe. You're talking asparagus, right?
Exactly. Thanks, buddy.
Thanks, Scott.
And thanks for setting us up today.
Yeah, you got it. Enjoy the cocktail.
Love it. All right, back to work here. We did the IPs. That's a damn good drink. Someone should be sharing that with me. Yes, I was talking about Canopy and the Bedrocan issue. And that was over supporting the brand. So go look that up. Also in 18, I think, was the Evergreen Licensing suing Tommy Chong. I picked that one just because we all think it's interesting to talk about Tommy Chong. And they alleged that I don't know if that's settled or not, so I'm still going to use alleged. But they sued Tommy because they said that he screwed them out of profits on another licensing deal that had been in place for a long, long time. Be clear about what you're licensing, who owns it, in what jurisdictions, and who's doing what, or you're going to end up with these sorts of difficulties. What else do I have here? Point number 4. What do you do? This always comes up. What do you do? And my notes to myself say if, but the truth is when. What do you do when the licensee creates other products that are synergistic or competitive to what you licensed? What do you do if the licensee, as a licensor, if the licensee does the same thing? They create their own products that are competitive or synergistic, or they go and come up with some other ideas that might fit into the family. What do you do about that? So you need to think about that, and this comes up all the time, right? So non-competes may be appropriate or may not be. A right of first refusal on newly developed products that fit within the brand family. Who shares in the profits of these new profits? You need to think about that. And I'll tell you an example where this happens all the time is when you have individuals or a group of individuals that are migrating as best they can from the black market, from illegal activities with products and edibles and oils and that sort of stuff, and they want to move into the legit, right? So they're talking to a legit company, but you've got someone who's been in creating cannabis products for 20 years, and every month he comes up with a new one. Do you get a right of first refusal on that? How does that work, right? So you need to talk about that. Packaging was my point number 5. This could have been talked about, in who does what in manufacturing and advertising promotion. But, if you get into products on the edible side and the medical side, packaging is huge. It's its own animal. And you need to know, if the packaging wrong, you'll kill the brand. So you need to understand who's in charge of that, who's doing what, who's paying for it, what about updates, how does that work? Distribution. And in what territories. So as a licensee, you've licensed this, say it's a product and you're going to sell it in this jurisdiction. What about other jurisdictions? Do you get a master territory? Are you allowed to use resellers? Are you allowed to have sub-distributors? What are the regulatory implications of that? Price, minimum advertised price. Like, can you just take this brand and undercut everybody else and ruin the prestige of the brand? You want to have those sorts of discussions. Stocking and inventory holding. This really gets down to minimum expectations of the licensee. If I've created a product, you're going to license it. Well, how much are you going to sell? How much are you going to buy? How much are you going to spend on your promotion? There needs to be minimum expectations in that business case that you should talk about up front. And similarly, quality, right? What are the best practices? Are there inspections? Are there safety? Are there recalls? What's the recall procedure? You're putting a bunch of, say, medical stuff into a pharmacy chain or a grocery chain or a health food chain, and there's a problem, there's a recall. Well, whose issue is that, right? If you just license this from the licensor, you get, as a licensee, you're the one getting billed for that. You sold it to the pharmacy, but you get to pass that back to the licensor. How does all that work? Those costs can be huge. You do a recall. I'm working in a company right now in the food industry, and we're getting recalls out of, wherever, not, related to us, but the numbers are huge, hundreds of thousands of dollars, millions of dollars. And if it, as a licensee, you need to be careful of that and at least be clear on who's responsible for what. The term of the agreement, right? Is this a 5-year deal, a 2-year deal, a 10-year deal? Is it renew? What happens if there's a change of control? In other words, you license this thing out to a licensee and then, they sold to somebody else, and that somebody else, maybe they're not so interested in your product, or maybe they have a competing product. What happens in these change of control scenarios? Reps and warranties come out of the agreement. So, I don't want to get into the legalese of rep and warranties, but think about the business issues of a rep and warranty. What if you have a topical CBD-based cream to fix whatever, and it doesn't work, right? You got the formula, you got the product, but it's not working as you thought, and you could get a representation that it does work, and it goes through lab testing, but it doesn't. What if your genetic was supposed to be a certain strain, but the grower, the genetics just get out of control? It's hard to keep those strains stable, or maybe impossible, some might argue. So what do you do about that if you're getting a different genetic? And regulatory. What happens when the licensor, I'm a licensee, but my licensor goes offside with the regulator? That's a problem, right? Maybe I'm not going to be able to get the product. Maybe they're put in the penalty box, which we see in the Canadian marketplace sometime, and vice versa. What if the licensee has a regulatory issue, but they spent a bunch of money? They spent a bunch of money on brand. They poured a bunch of money into inventory. They poured a bunch of money into distribution, and then they have a hiccup, or they're put in the penalty box with a regulator. Well, now what? Do I get to just take my brand back and take advantage of all that money they spent? Right? It's a tough decision, and a real business issue. Which brings us down to pricing and the royalty. Here are some of the things you need to think about in that. What is the royalty based on? Is it sales, either in units and dollars? Is it based on margin? Is it based on units? Is it based on cash flow or net income, or some net number as opposed to just sales? What is the percentage of that royalty, or the dollar amount of that royalty per unit? Is there an upfront payment, right? You could have a zero upfront payment. You could have a very significant upfront payment, which is going to impact this. How does the reporting work? So I had bought, and I'm collecting on right now, in the entertainment industry, royalties from a European, let's just put it that way, from a European development partner and distributor on a library that's somewhat valuable. And the company that I bought this from has never once received any reporting whatsoever. And the partner in Europe just refuses to do it. And it's quite clear in the contract that they're responsible for doing the reporting, right? And how do I know what I'm owed if if the other partner doesn't do the reporting? And the answer is I'm owed nothing. Like they just don't, they just say, well, we didn't make any money, so we're not sending you anything, which is just an outright lie. But you have to have some sort of reporting and some sort of way to enforce that. Should there be a third-party auditor, an accounting firm coming in and looking at this? What are the timing of payments? Is this a quarterly or a yearly, a monthly, a weekly? How does that work? What happens if there's a default? I talked about that briefly. And what's permissible under the jurisdiction? And what's the impact on registrations? So for example, in some states, I think this is current, don't hold me to this. Again, not a lawyer, but in California and Oregon, for example, deals that have royalty payments structured to revenue or profits may trigger a financial interest holder rule and require excess reporting that you hadn't thought about. Talk to a lawyer and think about how the royalty may or may not impact your compensation scheme. So in preparation for this, and because other clients of mine are just asking nonstop, how do we charge? How do we charge? We did a little valuation review of the market for royalties, and what we found is there's no consistent market at all. They're just all over the place. To give you an example of 4 semi-recent transactions in the space, we found one that had $5,000 down and 50% of gross margin was the royalty. Gross margin tied to that product. We found one that was $500,000 down and no royalty. We found one that was $3.75 million down and no royalty. We had one that was $500,000 down plus 50% of gross profit, which sounds very similar to the $5,000 down, 50% of gross margin. When we've worked with clients drafting our own, we've usually, we've decided what the down, the down is sort of driven by does the licensee have money and does the licensor need money, right? But beyond that, we've gone into sales royalties. So gross, we've done one with net income. We've done other bells and whistles that come with this, like an employment agreement. What if you have an individual or a handful of individuals that, again, we're in the black market, they're trying to go legit, so they want real jobs, they want to do the security checks, and they're going to bring 4 products into the fold, then part of the deal is an employment agreement that goes along with that, and maybe some share awards that go with it as well. So those are things to think about on the pricing. There is no market. It's not like buying and selling a stable business where you can say, well, this should be 6 times EBITDA or whatever it is. That doesn't seem to be a rule of thumb yet. The industry is too new. Here's what I would do. I would work backwards. I would create a proper financial model to use a discounted cash flow. I would come up with the value to me. So if I'm the licensee or the licensor, it doesn't matter. But I would come up with but as an example, being a licensee, I would come up with a model saying, okay, I got this product, now I can go sell it, and here's my model. And I would build in healthy rates of return into that model. I would discount it to today, right, on a range of a high, low of discount rates, which are tied generally to risk. And then I would come up with a number. And then I would deduct from that number the upfront payment. So let's just say I did that, and I was going to generate $10 million over 5 years, and discounted it came down to $1 million. I'm just making up numbers, so it comes down to $1 million, and the person that I'm licensing from needs $500,000 up front. Well, now I've got $1 million minus $500,000 is $500,000 to account for in this royalty stream. I would pick my easiest metric, probably sales, maybe a net number if I'm worried about sharing the risk of the costs associated with this distribution, right? Because the reason you do net is to share risk, right? Always. It's easiest just to do gross sales or unit sales, but you start doing net because you're saying, well, I don't know what the market's like. I think there's a market, but I don't know if it's going to be $10 or $8 or how that's going to work. I don't know if my costs are going to be $3 or $2 or how that's going to work. So I'm going to come up with a net number to share that risk with you. I would come up with a metric that makes most sense and create a percentage or a per unit that gives me over the 5 years $500,000 on a discounted basis, so I'm apples to apples. So I would engineer it that way, and then if you're using different discount rates, as I said, you've created yourself a range within which to negotiate. And you can obviously start at the low. You're not sharing your numbers with the other side, so you've got something that makes sense. And if somebody comes to you and says, yeah, that's all crap, I want, a 20% royalty rate when you calculated 7, you can plug that into your little model and you can say, that makes no sense for me, or I could make it work. I could make it work by maybe going back to some of the things we talked about and pushing some of the manufacturing or some of the packaging on the other. Yeah, I can pay you 20, but you need to do these 3 things. And there's a way to host that negotiation. So I think that's all. Hopefully the connection came through. I haven't seen any further comments on that. I'm going to play the theme song again here. You know how to reach me. Go to sinclairrange.com, SINCLAIR range, RNGE.com. Look for me, email me, call me, look for Ashley, email her, call her. Subscribe to us. Martinis with Scott on YouTube, Martinis with Scott on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And thanks again very much to the Fernie Distillers here in beautiful Fernie, British Columbia. Y'all have a great, y'all. Did I just say y'all? That's because I'm talking to my Nashville friends these days. Y'all have a great week, and we'll talk to you again.